Okay, we're at 12 o'clock. Let's get started. Kia ora everyone. My name is Sylvie. I'm MyHR's Chief Evangelist. I'm an HR person who works in closely with our marketing and sales team, which is why you see me doing these sessions a lot. I'm based up in Tamaki. It is mostly a lovely day out there, but it definitely feels like we're sliding through autumn into winter with the chilly temperatures we've had. I hope that you're staying warm and comfortable wherever you are. This afternoon session is about navigating a cost of living crisis for leaders and decision makers. So we are getting lots of inquiries from our customers about how they can support their employees during what feels like one of the never-ending compounding economic challenges that we're all facing at the moment. So we figured this session could be a good time to talk about things that you might be doing in your business to support your employees. I'm sure there are things that have come up for you in your world, some things you might not have thought about, and a couple of fish hooks to be aware of as you maybe agree to things temporarily to support your staff. So we'll jump in and get things started. What I will do is just quickly share my screen, and then we can kick off. Share that one. Lovely. And I'm hoping that is all coming through for you there as well. Right. All right, let's start moving through and talking about what we're covering off today. So the first thing to note is a little bit of housekeeping. Of course, an HR webinar wouldn't be complete without a bit of housekeeping at the start. So this webinar is for managers and leaders who are making decisions in their business. If you are an employee who is struggling with the cost of living right now, with petrol prices, with gas prices, you're certainly not alone, but this session might not be super helpful for you. I direct you to some of the many personal budgeting and finance tools around. Sorted has a really good place to start if you're looking for some guidance there, so have a look. But if you are a leader or a decision maker in your business, this is the right place. Thank you for coming along. So questions are welcome. I'm a really informal presenter. I think that it's much more interesting to have questions from you all rather than listening to me talk for an hour. So what I'll do is collate all your questions as we go through, and towards the end we'll have some Q&A time. If there is something you want to understand more from the webinar, or maybe something that's come up in your world that I haven't spoken about, please do drop a question in and let me know so that we can cover them off at the end. We did have a couple of questions submitted beforehand, which is fantastic. So I will make sure that that's all working, and yeah, we'll cover them off towards the end of the session today. Now, I flagged a couple of times, the webinar is being recorded, so you will have access to a recording afterwards. If you need to duck away to pick up the kids or to take a call, you're very welcome to. What this does mean is if you do ask a question and if I do answer it, there will be a public record available on the webinar. So I'll do my best to scrub any identifying details from your questions. You're also very welcome to ask them anonymously, just depends on what you're more comfortable with. Slides will be available afterwards. If you'd like to take notes as we go through, you're welcome, but if you just want to have a copy of the slides later on, that's totally fine. The slides and the webinar, you're very welcome to share with anyone who might find it useful. So feel free just to pay attention rather than taking notes as we jump in. And we'll talk a little bit about who we are before we kick off and why we're doing this session. So we're a better way to do HR, and we were founded in 2013, so we've been going for 13 years now. I'm in our Auckland office. We have offices in Christchurch as well as in Ōtautahi in Christchurch, and offices in Sydney and in Vancouver as well. So if you're in New Zealand, you will only ever speak to a New Zealand person. You won't have a Canadian accent on the other end of the phone. But we are in 3 countries now, supporting customers from all walks of life, which has been a fabulous story to be a part of. So what we do is we're outsourced HR covering all employment matters. Our HR platform does everything you think a good HRIS should, so performance reviews, onboarding, document storage, employee data storage, and the back end is where we deal with slightly more complicated pieces, which I'll talk about in a second. So we're really built for small and medium businesses, right? Our customer base largely is in the 20 to 100 employee sort of world. When we first started, we said no to bigger businesses who wanted to use us because we didn't think we could service them. We now do have some larger brands that you might recognise, including Resine Paints, the Breast Cancer Foundation, How Pizza. We do all of their HR, but really our core bread and butter is still that 20 to 100 employees, which is where we comfortably hang out. But the platform is one thing. That's where you log in and you can see everything in your MyHR account. We pair that with human expertise. So people like myself who are HR and employment law experts, we are writing your employment agreements for you, we're writing your disciplinaries for you, just like you might have an HR person who's not in your office or in your city. We're there to provide remote support to guide you through whatever opportunities or challenges you're facing and trying to navigate in your world. In terms of the type of businesses we work with, really it's all industries. So accommodation, hospitality, retail, manufacturing, FMCG. We've got quite a lot in professional services. Construction's a really growing industry for us. So there's quite a bit going on, and no lot that we haven't supported. Not a lot that we haven't seen. I had a comment come through just saying that it was quite echoey. I'm not sure what I'm able to do about that, unfortunately. We did a tech test before and it was working on the other end. Jackie, if that's a problem for you, try logging out and logging back in again. But if anyone else could let me know if it's particularly echoey for them, I might be able to try and grab a different microphone. So let me know what's coming through for you. Cool. Last piece to note here is we're a SaaS business, so we have a subscription-based model. So you pay per head count, you don't pay for the calls or engagement with us. So in April, you might call us 40 times because you've got questions about Easter, then you've got an employee who was stealing from the till, you've got someone else who's asking to work from home, you're having to write a whole work from home policy together, and then in May, you might call us once because you've got a new starter and you need to update their start date and their employment agreement. Your costs remain the same. We don't want to be the scary people who invoice you every 6 minutes. That really makes it hard for us to be the fence at the top of the cliff, especially for small businesses. We really want to make it easy to get a hold of us, so there's no cost per use. You use us as much as you need to, and the cost is based on the size of your business and the size of your headcount. And that's all. So let's jump into our webinar today and talk about what we're going to be looking at. But the first thing to note is we'll talk a little bit about what's going on in the world. You'd have to be living under a rock, I think, to not know that there's a bit of a cost of living squeeze on at the moment. We'll talk about why employees are struggling, your obligations as an employer, and what you need to be aware of. Some things around making decisions and setting precedents in your business. We'll talk specifically about pay rises because that's coming up a lot at the moment. We'll look at some other options, creative ways you might be able to support your team that doesn't add directly to your bottom line. We'll talk about working from home in particular because there are some things you need to be aware of there. We'll look at how you might say no to a request that you want to decline. And like I flagged earlier, we will have some time for questions. So jumping back into our content here, the first thing to talk about is what's going on in the world, right? So what's the economic context? Why are employees particularly struggling? And what are your obligations? What do you need to know or say yes to or say no to as employers? So at the moment, everything's expensive everywhere all at once. You'd have to be paying very little attention to the news not to know that the cost of living is hurting. Electricity prices have been in the news the last couple of days. Some pensioners are using food banks to survive because they're on fixed incomes. Interest rate rises are coming, especially as inflation sort of isn't cooling down. And obviously this is having a bit of an impact on the government. So for consumers, so people who are buying stuff for their households and for their individual kind of needs, the consumer price index is up 3.1%. So stuff like toilet paper and groceries and electricity and petrol overall is up about 3.1% from this time last year, which doesn't sound nasty until you look at what the curve of the CPI has been over the last little while. So in the last 4 years to March 2022, obviously famously post-COVID, we had a massive sort of inflation period that we were managing. Stuff was getting more expensive at the rate of 6 or 7% a year for quite a while. Then you had this dip kind of coming into the end of 2024, and it slowly started rising again as we're coming into 2025 and 2026. So 3.1% doesn't sound crazy until you look back at how much more expensive things are than they were 5 or 6 years ago. That 6%, 7%, 8% rises were compounding. And if you are looking at your sort of bank account after a week going, I'm not living a much more lavish life or at all a more lavish life than I was 6 or 7 years ago, and things are much more expensive. I don't have any cash left in the hand. You're certainly not alone. That's a feature of our economic environment and unlikely to be a sign of economic mismanagement or crazy spending on big holidays from your side of things. Now, all of us, probably know that we have a national fuel plan. We're at phase 1 of this at the moment. The government is eyeing up whether they need to move to phase 2. That gets decided by a bunch of decision makers in government. At the moment, there aren't any changes around fuel rationing or requiring people to work from home. The government has received advice that they should be guiding public servants, so people who work for the government, to be working from home. We'll see how much they take that advice up, especially given there was quite a push in the government to move public service people kind of coming back into the office. We'll see how that all kind of pans out, but some interesting moves there to watch. Now, for businesses, ANZ does an outlook survey every month looking at business confidence, looking at what people are expecting to happen. And interestingly, business confidence fell 26 points in March alone. So from a kind of medium level in February, there's been a massively steep drop off in terms of how confident we're feeling about things in the economy right now. The number of, or the percent of firms who expect to raise their prices in the next 3 months is up to 60%. 60% of businesses think they're going to be increasing their prices in the next 3 months, which is pretty wild. And the number of firms who are, or the percent of firms who are expecting cost increases is the highest it's been since early 2023, again, with all of that post-COVID inflation we were managing. So not a particularly rosy picture. So you're certainly not surprised by it, or I wasn't, again, given the headlines. But I thought I wanted to just paint the picture again that if you're struggling with costs, if things are getting more expensive in your business, if your staff are asking for more money, it's not a you problem, it's a circumstances problem. So employees in particular are having a bit of a hard time. The pressures with that kind of curve that I showed you are compounding. So 55% of us worry about money daily or weekly, which is pretty stressful. 45% of us, nearly half the country, couldn't access $5,000 within a week if they had an emergency, like their tyre blows out, or they need a root canal or some dental work, or they have to take a flight urgently to go see a family member who's navigating a sickness. Half of us don't have access to $5,000 within a week. 42% of us have credit card debt, and 31% have buy now, pay later debt. So those afterpay kind of models is where that debt comes in. And unemployment, as we probably are aware of, is the highest it's been since September 2015. So in 11 years, we're facing the highest level of unemployment at the same time as we're having costs rising and businesses are feeling very unconfident about the future. So a bit doom and gloom, I'm sorry to say, but that's why we're having a cost of living webinar. That's the circumstances that we're responding to. So as businesses, you are facing enormous pressures, or as organisations, right? You're facing increasing wage costs, you're facing increased cost of goods, transport's increasing, doing business is getting more expensive. There's a lot of macroeconomic factors that we can't control right now, and our employees are asking us, not unreasonably, for more money or for more support as there are particular price crunches that they're navigating. So what do you have to do? What are your obligations here? The first thing to note is you will need to follow whatever's written into your employment agreements. Many employment agreements that we review for our customers when they first come on board and they're showing us what documentation they have had in place will refer to a commitment to do an annual pay review, for example. Now, thank goodness, most of them don't say you will get a pay rise on an annual basis, but we will review your pay annually and make a decision from there. So if you have a commitment in your employment agreements to review your team's pay, you need to still be following that process unless you take it out of the employment agreement, which is a bit of a process. So be aware that you need to follow what's in your agreements, follow your policies. If you've made a commitment to supporting work from home, you'll need to continue to do that. If you've had a company policy that says we don't allow work from home, you might want to rethink that, and we'll talk about work from home specifically today. But make sure you're following what your written commitments to your team are as a first step. I would be sad to see anyone get into any legal trouble or have employees challenge you for not following the commitments you've already made. So that's kind of one to note. More broadly, you do always have an obligation to act in good faith. This is Section 4 of the Employment Relations Act. It's important because it's Section 4 after what the Act is and kind of the date it comes into force. It's really important. And in brief, this is to be constructive and communicative and not to do anything to deceive or mislead your team. So if every month you say, yeah, I'll increase your pay next month, it's coming, and then next month rolls around, you say, oh, sorry, my bad, can't do this month, but I promise I'll increase it next month, I promise. Those commitments that you're making and not following through on might cause you some legal trouble. I've never met a manager who would do that on purpose, but something just to be aware of in terms of not misleading or deceiving your employees. And lastly, you do need to act reasonably at all times. You don't have to agree to everything your employees ask for. You also probably can't just decline everything without considering what the request is. So acting reasonably is a key dynamic in the employment relationship that I just wanted to call out at the start of this conversation. So let's go into the details here. How are people responding to the crisis? What are your choices? How do we talk about work from home and some other options that you might not have thought of? But the first thing to note is if you are making decisions to change anything in response to the fuel crisis, kind of cost of living generally, you want to be making decisions based on the role or on the team. So if you have someone who's asking to work from home, maybe Annika, who's one of your engineers, and you agreed to her to work from home, you probably should offer the same thing to the rest of your engineers as well. You don't want to disadvantage people in your business just because they didn't think to ask for something or just because they thought you might say no. So if you are offering certain things to certain people, make sure that that's fair and consistent across either everyone who has the same job or everyone in that team or potentially everyone in the business. The other piece to note is that custom and practice, so just the way things are done around here, can sometimes become part of an employee's terms and conditions if it goes on for long enough and if the employee would reasonably expect that thing to continue. An example of this is we had a client who works in professional services post-COVID who agreed to, have everyone work from home when, we were at level 4 and level 3 of the COVID alert framework. And when they wanted to bring everyone back into the office, because they hadn't been explicit enough about the conditions under which they were approving work from home, a lot of their employees just wanted to continue working from home full time, which wasn't something the business wanted to support. So if you are agreeing to an allowance, if you are agreeing to work from home for a set period of time, if you're agreeing to any other changes, if you do want those changes just to be temporary, be really clear about it, document it in writing, kind of capture it up, and make sure that your employees understand that it's temporary and why you're making it temporary, because there are particular circumstances that we're trying to respond to. Just a word about documenting things in writing. Depending on what's normal for your business, this could be in a letter if you're in professional services and you have MyHR there to help with your documentation. An email is totally fine if you use Slack or Teams and you're kind of communicating with people. A Slack or Teams message is fine as well. So don't feel like there has to be a huge, massive admin burden. It's totally fine for this to be, just whatever is the way that you normally communicate with your staff. Could I give my team a pay rise is a real it depends question, and I don't have a specific answer for you. The first thing to consider is, can you afford it? Are you in a position where you can give everyone in your business a 3% cost of living increase? Are you in a position where you can give them a 2% increase? Could you maybe stretch it to 4%? There are a lot of factors that go into these conversations about pay rises, and I can't cover them all off today. But the first question is, if you can afford it, think about it. And if you can't afford it, that's fine too. I flagged that the cost of living, the CPI at the moment is 3.1%. If you can get anywhere near that as a part of your annual pay reviews or as a one-off increase for your team, that's fantastic. But if you can't, you're certainly not alone. And we'll talk about some other options you have to support your staff here otherwise. But the pros of giving your team a pay rise obviously are your staff earn more money, that's a bit of a given, and you have a bit less chance of disgruntled employees jumping ship because they feel like their earnings aren't keeping up with the cost of everything they're having to pay for their rent or their mortgage and their electricity bill and their rates and their groceries and all that kind of stuff. The cons, obviously, are your pay rises are locked in. If you give someone a 5K pay increase this year, next year their salary will still be $5,000 higher, and the year after that, and the year after that. So you're locking yourself into some costs that might only make sense or be appropriate because there is this kind of spike in petrol prices, particularly right now, and a bit more of a squeeze on cost of living generally. So have a think about whether pay rises are the best tool to use if you even can afford them. And if you can't afford them, let's look at some other options that you have for supporting the team. So strategy one, or approach one when thinking about supporting your employees, is to increase their earnings or to increase payments to them. So this could look like a one-off payment. If you just wanted to do hey everyone, time's really tough, we can't afford to give pay rises, but I want to give everyone a $100 payment as a thank you to acknowledge times are tight and to help fill up your ute this week. I don't know any employee who would turn down an extra $100 as a thank you or as a one-off payment, but that's a choice you can make. You also might want to think about reimbursing transport. So we have a customer who is an architect and works a lot in urban planning. And so they will contribute, I can't remember the value, I think it's about $40 a week if employees use public transport. So this gets loaded onto their card that they can tap and use on the bus or on the train. And that way that they are not only supporting their employees with their costs to get to and from the office, they're also supporting kind of the use of public transport in the context of them being architects who work in the urban planning space. So that's really values and mission aligned for them, which I thought was quite a cool benefit. But it doesn't have to just be public transport. You could be giving people an allowance towards fuel. Potentially you could be reimbursing them 20% of their fuel costs or 40%. It doesn't have to be everything. Potentially you could be making loans to your employees to purchase an e-bike or to purchase an EV if you've got cash to manage employee loans that way. Certainly you could be looking at paying this in full, paying it in part. You could be reimbursing them based on receipts. You could be just sending them cash. There's a lot of different ways you could structure this if it's something you want to explore. Again, these can be really clearly time bound. So you can say for the next 8 weeks, we will be giving everyone a $50 transport allowance to help with your costs getting to and from work. This is scheduled to end at the end of June. We might revisit it, but for the moment, it is just a temporary measure. So really nicely time bound. They don't lock in your costs over time, and they're really clearly targeting a particular pain point right now. Another piece here is the flexible hours piece. So I have been lucky enough to enjoy a 10 a.m. start for a long time now. It suits my lifestyle, it suits my sleep cycle. Now that I have a 1-year-old that I'm dropping off at daycare and at his grandma's house, I'm having to get up a lot earlier to manage traffic, and it is my least favorite part of my week, sitting in my commute. It sounds like a bit of a first world problem, but I've really been struck again by how difficult it is to have a solid work-life balance when your commute times aren't aligned to your work and to your life schedule. So if you can, some flexible hours here might be useful. Can your staff start at 6 a.m. and finish at 2:30 p.m? Can they start later, kind of in my schedule, and start at 10 a.m. and finish at 6:30? That's obviously not going to be suitable for everyone, but if you can cut the amount of time someone's sitting in traffic from 45 minutes to 20 minutes, you're obviously reducing the load on their car, you're reducing the load on their petrol, and potentially giving them a bit more flexibility there, which might be suitable. Compressed work weeks could be another choice. We've got a client who works in software development, and a lot of their team are not customer facing. They've got account managers and kind of project directors who work in with customers, and so all of their development team are not customer facing. And for a long time, they've offered flexibility around a compressed work week. So for a while, that was a 9-day fortnight. People worked just under an hour extra every day. So every fortnight, they got that 10th day of work off, which they scheduled to suit the team. And more recently, they've switched to offering 4 10-hour days. So you're still getting 40 hours of work a week out of your team, but you are reducing their commute time because they only have to be working 4 days a week if they're coming into the office, and again just reducing the cost and pressure on those commute costs, whether they're coming with public transport or in their own private vehicle. So something else to consider. The last point here was you might want to think about putting on company-funded transport, again, if that's suitable for you. We've got a manufacturing client in East Tamaki. A lot of their employees work and live quite closely together in South Auckland. Live close together, not work, because the manufacturing site's in East Tamaki. And they put on a company-funded shuttle. So they will pick everyone up from their house at between 7 and 7:30 a.m. They'll get to the factory by 8 a.m. and then they'll drop everyone home afterwards as well. Not something that will be suitable for everyone, but something you might want to consider if you have staff who live and work closely together, and it sort of makes sense for your company culture and for your access to a vehicle, if that's something you want to consider. So we've talked about ways of kind of increasing payments or putting things on for employees, and the other choices you can make are around reducing costs. So one option here could be providing carpool support. Do you have enough people working in your business who maybe aren't as close to each other as to say, hey, Lisa, do you want to carpool with me in the morning? Potentially this is something you could offer. You might want to maintain a spreadsheet and kind of keep a track of who could be good carpool buddies. So you're not creating an extra cost for yourself, but you are providing your team with a facilitated way to reduce their own cost by carpooling, if that's something they want to consider. If you have staff who are working longer shifts, you might want to consider meal support. This might be something you can put on, especially if you're working in hospitality and in accommodation. Most hospitality businesses I've ever worked in have put on a meal for staff. So it might be something you're already doing, but potentially if you can get bulk discounts by catering in full, that might be a way for you to offer support to your team that isn't kind of increasing payments to them directly. Discount partnerships. Is there a gym locally where you can get subsidized membership for your employees? Are you large enough that you can have relationships with Noel Leeming or with who else would be in there? Maybe the warehouse, any of these kind of big box providers around discounts for goods and services and for whiteware might be something to consider. There are many, many companies out there who will look at ways of facilitating access to kind of discounted rates and preferential purchasing terms. So something to look at if that's appropriate for your business and you've got someone who might be able to manage that. There's obviously a bit of a meme going around, or there are always memes that there's a big, massive cost of living crisis, and the employer responds by putting on a 20-minute lunch and learn around how to run a budget. While acknowledging that it is difficult to budget your way out of a tough living circumstance, if your employees are paid, I would say, anything above 25 to 30% above minimum wage. They may have enough wiggle room in their personal finances to find some financial tools useful. If you are thinking about putting on a session for your employees, there are paid providers of this. There are providers who will do it as a part of their kind of marketing budget and their brand development. Crayon.co.nz has recently moved out of the parental leave space into kind of the financial wellbeing space. I take a look at their offering. I was quite impressed by their support they can provide. North Shore Budgeting Services are a really large provider in Auckland who provide support to people around the country. So have a Google and see who might be in your area. And if you'd like anyone recommended, get in touch with me and I can have a look at who might be suitable for your needs. So none of these are necessarily directly increasing costs for you, but they are tools to show your employees that you're engaged in paying attention to their concerns and that you are trying to support them, even if salary increases or wage increases might not be suitable right now. And then we come to working from home. So you do have some obligations to be aware of around working from home requests or around requests to change people's hours. So written into law is employees do have a legal right to ask for flexible work arrangements. This includes working from home, whether it's changes to their hours permanently or just for a short period of time, or changes to their start-finish times like those ones I called out before. So if you have an employee ask to work from home, you do need to consider that request in good faith. So have a think about whether you practically can support it, and you are required to respond within a month to tell them sort of what factors went into your decision, whether you've approved it or not approved it, and sort of next steps from there if there are any. Now, you can decline a work from home request if you have a good reason. And a good reason isn't, I just don't like it, but a good reason is it would affect kind of customer delivery or accessibility to customers. If there's a productivity reason, if you can't kind of reallocate the work, if it would just be practically too tricky to implement, you can say that you don't want to support someone's work from home request, or that you don't want to support their changes to their hours or changes to their start finish times. But be aware that there is a bit of a process for responding to a flexible work arrangement request. It's not just an employee asking for something and you can kind of have a think about it. There are some guidelines to be aware of here. Now, I wanted to just call out that 33% of employees in New Zealand do work from home at least some of the time. That number includes hybrid employees like me who do a day a week and then days in the office, and then also employees who are completely fully remote. That massively varies based on industry. It is very difficult for a barista to work from home. It is very difficult for an electrician to work from home. So there are some roles in some industries where this just won't be practical. Obviously, professional services, anything in kind of the management space, anyone who has a bit of a desk element to their role, there might be some options for working from home here. But if it's not going to work for you and your business, it's okay to say no. We'll go through a script for that a bit later on, but do be aware that you don't have to agree to the requests from your employees just because they think it's appropriate. Now, the other piece I wanted to call out here as an option might be some performance-based incentives. So being able to outlay extra cash on wages, on salaries, on a company-funded shuttle, on staff lunches is not practical if your revenue kind of remains the same. There just is only so much money to go around. You can't do more with less. But in a world where employees are asking for more money or to increase their earnings, there might be some options here to explore some performance-based incentives or to lean into them if you have them already. So this could be tying additional earnings to things like output. If you're in a manufacturing world, can you make 10 more widgets per day? If you're in a professional services world, can you service one extra customer on top of your existing portfolio? And if you can, here's what that might look like in terms of remuneration and reward. If it's an efficiency piece, again, in the manufacturing or production world, can we increase our utilization rate? If you're a billable hours person, same question, can we increase it by 5%? And here's what the compensation for you will look like. Is there a cost reduction thing that your employees could contribute to? Is there a team performance element you can introduce? Basically, is there a way to make it clear to your staff that there is an opportunity to earn more if our outputs or our efficiency or our costs increase or decrease, which shifts the conversation away from we don't have the money to pay you to if you earn more money for us or if you save us money, then there's a bit of extra cash in the kitty to look at pay increases, to look at one-offs, to look at incentive-based payments. So something to explore. We have plenty of conversations with our customers about this. If it's something you'd like to look into, you're welcome to book in some time with me or to give us a call and we can have a look at what might suit you. Now, if you do need to say no, I wanted to put some language on the screen to give you an example of how that conversation might go. Obviously, this is Sylviaified. It's language I would feel comfortable using. So if it's not quite right for your context, that's fine. I just wanted to give you an example. But let's look at saying no to a request for a pay increase and to laying out how that might go. So I totally understand that costs are going up. Paul, we're feeling it as a business too. It's not a surprise that you've come to me asking for a pay increase. At the moment, we're not in a position to increase your wages, but I do want to support you where we can because I know that this is a real concern. Let's look at some other options together. This might be a temporary travel allowance. Maybe we could adjust your start times to reduce your commuting costs. What would make the biggest difference for you? Kind of where are you feeling the pinch right now? So I've said no, we're not increasing his wages, but I am saying I do want to support you. Maybe there are some other things we can look at. And if you can say to your employees, what would make the biggest difference for you? Kind of where's this request coming from? Potentially you can get to the root of the problem and see if maybe I can change Paul's start time from 8 a.m. to 7 a.m. and maybe that will allow him a bit less time on the road and reduce his petrol costs over time. Just an option. Now, if you have an employee who's dead set on a significant pay increase, or maybe you've given them a 3% pay increase and they were hoping for 10 and they feel super frustrated and let down, and you're going, I really busted my balls to get you a 3% increase and now you're coming to me feeling disappointed, that can be a really frustrating experience to have as a manager or as a business owner. So my recommendation always when employees are looking for more money than you can give them or looking for an unrealistic increase is to make it clear what would be expected of them. If Paul is working as an accountant and he only has a portfolio of kind of 20 customers he deals with, make it clear that he would need to get a 20% increase in billable hours out of them, or he would need to expand his capacity to take on 25 customers, not 20, and that's his pathway from 65 to 80 grand. Or you can say to your junior welder, I can't give you an extra 15 grand a year because your work isn't that valuable to me. You probably wouldn't use that language, but lay out what the steps are you would need to see from them, make it clear what support you can offer in terms of training, in terms of coaching or mentoring, but make it clear that there is a pathway to that income. But what you expect from them is going to be upped as well. So potentially something to explore if you do have employees coming to you and asking for pay increases that are wildly beyond what you think is appropriate or what you think is realistic for their role. Saying no to a work from home arrangement might look a bit different, but again, we'll start off with a no and then we'll move to what our options might be. So thanks, Lisa, for raising this. I completely understand why working from home at the moment might feel like a good option. Petrol prices are increasing. I know that your personal circumstances have changed. I can see why you're asking for this. I need to tell you that this is a role that does need to be performed on site, and so working from home isn't something that we can approve. I also do need to be consistent across the team. Most of the roles in this business have to be performed on site, so I can't offer work from home for some roles and not for others. It wouldn't be practical, but I do want to see if there are other ways that we can support you. So again, what's the main driver behind your request? Is it about flexibility? Is it about living costs? Let's see what we can do for you that's workable within the scope of your job. So again, I'm not telling Lisa to get lost. I'm explaining why I can't approve her work from home request, and then we're talking about kind of what our other options might be. Ultimately, there might not be anything. If there isn't any extra money, for other allowances or payments, if there isn't anything else in terms of flexibility that you can offer, Lisa just might be disappointed or Paul just might be disappointed. And that's okay. Your job isn't to please everyone. Your job is to make sure you're treating people fairly and meeting your obligations to them, and where possible, kind of meeting their needs so that people are happy and productive and engaged at work. So we'll wrap up and jump into questions. And if there's something that's been on your mind, jump it in and put it in the question box now. Or if there's something that you would like to challenge or to dive into earlier, please let me know so that we can go through them shortly. So, some final thoughts or observations from me on this piece. Your employees can ask for whatever they want. Nothing is stopping them from asking for a $50,000 pay increase or to work from home 5 days a week when they're a plumber. Your employees can ask for things that you don't have to agree. What you do have to do is be reasonable, act in good faith, consider whether their request is practical, and if it's not, figure out what some other alternatives might be that can accommodate them. If someone specifically asks about work from home or about flexible start and finish times or flexible working arrangements, these do need to be considered a bit carefully, and you do have to go back to them within a month. So just be aware that there's some particular obligations there. Treat your team equitably. If you're making an allowance for Annika, the engineer who wants to work from home, offer that to everyone else in the team. I'm sure that's how most of you treat your staff anyway, but just wanted to call it out in case it wasn't on your mind. And be really clear if something is a temporary change or permanent. If you are temporarily allowing your team to do 3 days a week from home rather than their usual 1 day a week from home, make it really clear that that's a temporary change which will be reviewed or reassessed or maybe come to an end in 8 weeks, in 4 weeks' time, in 3 months' time, whatever your timeframes are. And document everything that's been agreed to. Again, this can be in a letter, it can be in an email, it can be in a text, really, if you need to. But what this is useful for is if in 8 weeks' time you have Annika saying, but I thought this was a permanent change to my terms and conditions. I don't want to come back into the office 5 days a week. I like working from home 4 days a week. And then you call up someone like me and to help us kind of navigate the situation. If there was a text or an email to say, hey, I'm happy to approve your working from home request for the next 8 weeks. One, hopefully we don't get into that situation because the employee is clear and knows it's only short term. But if the employee is challenging it, it means that we have this kind of written communication to fall back on, and we can manage things from there. So that's everything from me. We'll jump into some questions. What I will do as those are coming through is I will jump in and pull up the questions that came through beforehand. Just make sure my Slack doesn't come up on screen. That's all good. Cool. So the first question we had come through in advance was, how can funeral homes work from home? I don't have the answer to that question because I would think that they can't. I'm not clear if there are regulations around having cadavers in regulated environments. I assume they would be. I would imagine that morticians need access to a workshop where they can prepare the cadavers and the bodies and treat them respectfully and have access to all the chemicals they need to manage things. So it's not clear to me that there would be an option for funeral homes to have a broad work from home policy. Potentially if you had administration staff or an office manager, then potentially they could have some work from home time. If your funeral directors would spend time preparing the eulogies and talking to family members, maybe that could be done from home. So wherever it's appropriate, I would assume there would be something to explore there, but there may just be some jobs and some industries where working from home is impractical. I would think funeral homes will be at the top of that list, but very happy to be challenged on that, or if the person who asked that question is on the call, I'm happy to go into the specifics in more detail if there's anything extra you'd like to share. Another question here was, is providing alternative measures, for example, carpooling for staff who live far away to travel to work, commensurate with the application of assisting without monetary gain or not enabling staff to work from home? It is totally reasonable for you to decline work from home requests and not increase people's pay, but instead choose to support them with carpooling. So it's totally fine for you to choose that option of the many choices available to you. Just because you do one thing to support them, for example, carpooling, doesn't mean that you have to also make payments to them or that you have to agree to work from home requests. You can choose what's appropriate to your job and what's affordable to you. Agreeing to one thing doesn't mean you agree to other things. So I hope that answers your question, but if you would like any more specifics or for me to go into more detail, please let me know. Next question. If we are to offer an allowance such as for travel to and from the office, can this be available for a specified time rather than being a permanent change? Yeah, 100%. If you would like to only offer something for a temporary period of time, that's totally fine. As long as you, just to reiterate points I've made, communicate that it's only for a period of time. And if anyone challenges you on this, hopefully it's captured in writing, that's perfectly fine. There's absolutely no need to offer these things as a permanent change. It's totally fine for them to be temporary. So thank you for the question. Alrighty, a couple of others coming through. Kath, kia ora Kath, thank you for joining us, asks, rather than a pay rise during the fuel crisis, should we consider staff use of work vehicles to and from work? Yeah, that's a great solution. The 2 points to note there is you will probably need to update your company vehicle policy to include some language around people using them for travel to and from work. You'd also want to make sure that your fringe benefit tax stuff doesn't get triggered there. That's a conversation with your accountant. It's not something I have the expertise to answer. But if your employees have access to a company car that they can use to travel to and from work, my understanding is that then becomes a fringe benefit and a tax may apply. So there's probably going to be some additional costs there for you, but yeah, great idea. Certainly something to explore. A question for Tim. Kia ora, Tim. Thanks for coming along. Wouldn't support for transport costs be fully taxable under PAYE or risk being flagged as a fringe benefit? Yep, that's totally fair. If your employees are giving you receipts and then you are reimbursing them for those payments, the tax situation, I believe, is different to if you're just paying them $100 a week extra. The tax piece, there's a PAYE element that applies there. I don't believe it applies to reimbursing them for expenses. So there's a few different ways you can cut it with an eye to the tax obligations. But again, a conversation for your accountant. Sorry, I don't have the tax knowledge to answer that. But yes, there will be a tax component you'll need to be aware of. Tracy, kia ora Tracy, asks, would you recommend having a work from home policy or just leave it to being as requested? I would totally recommend a work from home policy, partly because you want to be fair to everyone and make it clear what people's obligations are so that your team sort of know what's expected of them. Secondly, if you do have employees who are pissing around at home and you see a productivity drop off because they are enjoying access to their couch and enjoying access to their bed and to the lovely parks in their neighbourhood, you want to be able to raise the issue with them and potentially revoke the work from home arrangement because you've seen a change in their productivity and their output. It's really best to have that documented in policy because otherwise it can become quite contentious when we're trying to navigate that without anything written in place. And the third reason is if employees are working from home, you now have health and safety obligations that extend to their house because it is their place of work. So a work from home policy that's robust should have at least a bit of a checklist around, do you have a safe working space? Are your cables all tucked away? Do you have a chair and a desk? Do you have the equipment that you need? And the kind of other bits of health and safety stuff you might want to be mindful of. So, yeah, I'd strongly recommend a working from home policy. We have one that we provide to our customers as and when needed. So if it's something you're thinking about, let us know and we can have a chat with you about what that might look like. Anonymous asks, should companies review these challenges even though there's no support that can be offered to their employees? I think it would be a bit naive to think that your employees aren't struggling at the moment, unless you're in a very well-paid environment, in which case, fantastic news for you. But I think addressing them or talking about them shows that you are connected to and understanding the challenges your employees are facing. And so even if there is no support you can provide, you just don't have the capital or the cash to increase their wages, you just don't have any other tools that are available to you, communicating that to your staff, I don't think is ever going to be unwelcome. And it's potentially an opportunity for them to come to you with some ideas they might have. Maybe there is something you can do, but you haven't thought about it because you're not on the tools or you're very busy, managing a business rather than kind of being in the day-to-day. So if there's nothing you can do for your staff, I think it's okay to call that out and say, hey, we've looked at it. Here are some things we considered. I went to a webinar with this HR lady talking about some choices. Here's what we looked at. It's just not practical for us for these reasons. If anyone has any ideas, please let us know. But please know that we're not immune to these challenges, or we're not insensitive to them. We just don't have the means to make any changes right now. And as an employee, I personally would appreciate my employer being transparent about that, rather than thinking that they are ignoring the massive increases in petrol and diesel costs and not doing anything about it. Another question, with performance-based incentives, should an incentive be offered to staff just to get them to work on time, remembering it's in their contract to start at 8 a.m.? That's totally up to you. I would think that would be a really poor use of your resources. If you have employees who need to arrive at work at a certain time and aren't getting there, to me, that's a conversation about managing their conduct at work. You need to trust that your staff will get to work at a certain time so that they can do their jobs and so you can run your business. If your employees aren't getting to work on time, it's in a performance or a misconduct conversation. So potentially we can talk about a PIP, potentially we can talk about a disciplinary and formal written warnings or final written warnings. If you wanted to offer people an incentive payment to get to work, you can, but then you're that's what they're paid to do. That's what their hourly rate or their salary covers, is getting to work on time and being ready to start work on time. So it's a bit of a financial penalty for you when your employees should just be getting to work on time. So it's not the tool I would reach for to start with, but certainly something you can consider if you wanted to, and if you have the extra cash. Sun, kia ora Sun, thank you for coming along, asks, what if someone is working from home but goes to a cafe or another city to work without reporting it? If you're, it depends a little bit on what your expectations are. So if you are happy for an employee to work from a cafe or to go and spend some time with their parents in Pocono rather than being in Wellington, then it might be fine for them to work from a different location. If it's not okay, if you do need them to be at their house because that's where the most reliable internet connection is, maybe they work on sensitive, confidential stuff and you don't want someone looking over their shoulder at a cafe and looking at what they're working on. Those are totally good reasons for requiring someone to have a designated working remotely location, like their house, and for them to have to ask permission to work from somewhere else. Again, a good work from home policy will make that really clear. We'll say your remote working location is your home. If you would like to work from somewhere else, this has to be approved by your manager beforehand. And we'll lay out kind of consequences if that policy is not followed. So it's okay not to allow someone to do those things you've described. It might be a conversation now just to reset expectations if you don't have a clear working remotely policy. If you do have a clear working remotely policy, have a look at what that policy says about alternative locations, and that will give some guidance about what your next steps are. Mary asks, what would be the best approach to support staff from an NGO? Mary, that's a great question. I think all of the things I've outlined today could be appropriate for an NGO. I think what's going to be different is you are going to be extremely strapped for cash, especially in this funding environment. So potentially none of what I've outlined is going to be useful for you, is going to be helpful to your staff. At that point, there kind of isn't anything you can do. It's okay if you don't have the resources to support your staff with any of these examples. Again, I would have a really clear conversation with the team, make it clear that you've looked into other options and you've explored what those choices might be, but that you don't have the resources to support them. If you can't do anything, that's okay. Just communicate about it and be transparent. Anonymous asks, how do we fairly manage hybrid expectations when some roles in the business, like warehouse or front of house, physically cannot work from home? I think that's a really excellent question, and it requires a bit of thoughtful management of the situation. So if your warehouse or front of house staff have to be on site, that's kind of end of conversation, right? Again, practically you can't offer them work from home arrangements. And for your office staff, if they can work from home, I can't think of many workplaces where the on-site staff would be inherently furious about that, or they would feel like there was a really, really major unfairness or kind of lack of fairness advantage. It's okay to have different kind of policies or different working arrangements with your different teams because they do different work. You're not treating people unfairly necessarily, you're just treating them differently. So having some work from home time for your office staff or those who can work from home on principle is fine. If those staff always worked from home, it's then kind of the cultural stuff that becomes a bit hard. If the warehouse staff feel like they are never able to get a hold of their purchasing colleagues, if they feel like they can never get in touch with the engineers because they're always working from their bloody house, in bloody Mount Albert or whatever, that's going to drive some kind of cultural frustrations and resentment. So treating different teams or different types of work differently is okay, as long as it's not, you're not paying one team $20,000 a year extra just because they're that team. The working from home piece, have a think about how you might manage it. Keep an eye to making sure that your on-site team can still get the contact time and still get what they need from their colleagues who can work from home. Most of the time, it doesn't need to be a problem as long as it's managed thoughtfully, which I guess is what you're getting at. Cool. Still a few questions here, so we're at 10 minutes through. If you have another question, flick it through now. Otherwise, I'll answer these in front of me and then we can wrap up maybe a couple of minutes early. So Anonymous asks, if an employee claims that they can no longer afford the commute, at what point does their personal transport issue legally become an employer's problem, if ever? The short answer is it never becomes your problem. Employees are typically responsible for the costs of getting themselves from their house to their place of work. Now, if you have jobs that are done remotely, if you're flying people into remote locations for electrical work or for really gnarly projects, typically that cost is going to be on you, because expecting employees to manage the costs of a fly in, fly out arrangement is unreasonable. So I'm not referring to those circumstances, but typically getting themselves from home at least to an office or to a base site is the employee's problem, I guess. It's the employee's responsibility. If you have an employee saying, I can't manage the commute costs because I can't get to the office, it's too expensive, I think your first response should be, that sounds really difficult. I'm sorry to hear that. Let's look at ways that we might be able to support you. Is there a weekly transport allowance we can make for the next little while? Or can we give you 4 days in the office at 10 hours a day so that we compress your working week and you don't have to commute for that 5th day a week? Can we change your start and finish time so you're avoiding peak travel hours and reducing your fuel costs? There will typically be some things you can look at least to see if you can reduce costs for them. But ultimately, employees signed up for the job and the location it is, and getting themselves to and from work is their responsibility. If you have employees refusing to come to work, it becomes a bit of a disciplinary situation, unfortunately. I wouldn't start there. Again, I would start with, what are our options? Let's look at how we can support you. But if there's nothing you can do, or if you've done everything you can do and it's still a problem, the employee really needs to weigh up if this is still the right job for them, and whether it's something that they want to continue with. Question from Jackie. Kia ora, Jackie. With working from home, are we obligated to look at the ergonomic workplace setup, provide extra equipment, and so on? That's a great question. If it is a requirement of the employer that they work from home for a period of time, say, for example, you have hot desks at your workplace, and so you've got 100 employees, but you can only ever have 60 of them on site, and so some people have to be working from home at least some of the time. If it's an employer requirement, I would say yes, you are obliged to provide equipment to make sure the person can work from home if they don't already have a desk or have a chair or have a monitor stand, for example. If it's a request of the employee, they're saying, hey, I have a perfectly suitable setup at work, but I would like to work from home 2 days a week to suit my lifestyle. I would say it starts as the employee's responsibility to make sure that they provide that equipment, but overall there is an employer responsibility to make sure that they are healthy and safe at work. So maybe they have a desk and a monitor, but maybe their chair is really shitty, and so over time they develop, like a tennis elbow, or they've got back problems. I think at that point there would need to be a conversation about whether it's come time for the employer to contribute to their setup. One of the requirements you could apply is to say, if you want to work from home, you must supply the gear that is ergonomic for you. So that needs to be a chair that meets certain standards. It has to be a desk that's reasonable. There has to be a certain amount of light and ventilation. So you can make it a part of your requirements that you will only approve work from home if their work from home setup is suitable. But beyond that, whether it's the employer's responsibility or not can get a bit grey. So start with it being your responsibility if you're forcing them to work from home, the employee's responsibility if they ask to work from home. Make sure that their setup is suitable before you sign off on it. Otherwise, you might need to bear some of the cost. And if there's anything in the grey that falls in there, it's a bit of a negotiation piece. Anonymous asks, I have an employee who by choice arrives early to beat traffic, but is in a role that requires on-site attendance for full office hours. They asked for an early finish too, but we would need to arrange other cover, so I declined because of the role requirements. They also tend to take short lunches as no need to go off-site. What do you suggest to ensure they aren't feeling disgruntled? So it sounds like the employee has something that they value, which is arriving early, and then they asked for an early finish as well, which you declined because of the cover of the role. So the first thing I would do is to check that you're not breaching minimum wage requirements. If they're working 45 hours a week rather than 40 hours a week because of their start and finish times, just check that that doesn't kind of breach the minimum wage piece. Maybe it does or maybe it doesn't. If it does, that's immediately a conversation that you need to have, and I'd recommend getting some legal advice around kind of what your choices are there. But it sounds like they have chosen to arrive to work early. They understand that that means that they still have to be there until 4 p.m. or 5 p.m. because of the coverage on site, and that's a choice that they're making. So potentially have a chat with them or a follow-up conversation to say, hey, I just wanted to check that we're clear on what's expected of you, that you're arriving at 7 and you're finishing at 5, and did you have any questions about how that pans out? Maybe just to check in. It's not clear to me that they would immediately be feeling disgruntled because they have half of what they want. They have the early start time. And then maybe if they do appear frustrated or upset, maybe just a conversation with them to understand if there's anything else you can do to support them, around that piece. If they can't have it both ways, kind of ultimately that's a choice that they can make. Anonymous asks, in a tightening economy where we can't meet every salary increase request, you're not alone, how do we distinguish between an employee's right to request flexibility and the business's operational requirement to have them on site without damaging morale or having a personal grievance claim? So you can approve or decline a flexible working request within what makes sense for your business, but you can't avoid the consequences of that. If an employee is frustrated that they have had their flexible working request declined, even if it was for a perfectly legitimate reason, you can't win an emotional argument with a logical argument. You might say, look, I know that you've asked to work from home. However, we service customers in multiple different time zones. It's really important that you're here from 7 to 4:30 p.m. I don't have any flexibility around that. And I know you'd like to start at 9 a.m., but I can't approve that. You've declined that for a perfectly legitimate reason, which is related to your customers. They probably still are going to feel disappointed. And it's kind of okay. It's okay not to please, you can't please everyone, and you certainly can't please your customers and your employees' request for this 9 a.m. start time. So you sort of have to be prepared that there might be some frustration or disappointment about that. The MB website has a really good list of the reasons why an employer can decline a flexible working arrangement. It basically all comes down to operational stuff. So would it be too hard to arrange cover? Would it be too tricky to kind of support customers? Would it be impractical to redistribute their work? Like if it's just too hard and doesn't make sense, that's okay. It can't be because you don't like them, or it can't be because you hate working from home and think it's a waste of time. There has to be an operational reason, but as long as that operational reason is like true and sort of makes sense, you're probably going to be fine. So I wouldn't worry too much about the personal grievance side of things, but just be prepared that telling someone they can't have what they want is probably going to be disappointing. There's sort of no way around that. Amber asks, kia ora, Amber. We have staff who have work vehicles that use their vehicles to get into the workshop. Some of them have chosen to move much farther away from the workshop, and it's costing the business much more money in fuel. Can we manage this in some way so that their decision to move double the mileage away doesn't disadvantage the business? Yeah, great question, Amber. I would see if you have a policy in place which outlines what happens. Some of the customers I work with will cap their contribution to an employee's cost of travel to work to 20 kilometres of travel or half an hour of travel time. So if you live 10 Ks within the workshop, totally fine, we'll pay for all of that. If you live 18 Ks away from the workshop, no worries, we'll pay all of that. If you live 25 Ks away, we'll pay for 20 Ks, but you then need to cover the last 5 Ks. So they deliberately cap it so that they're only paying for a certain radius away from work, which is perfectly reasonable. I'm assuming you don't have anything like that in place, and so your employees just in their minds have the understanding that they will have their work travel to and from completely paid for regardless of how far away they move. One, you can just let that stand and put a new policy in place which says going forward, any new employees will have their travel to and from capped at half an hour or capped at 20 k's, whatever measures appropriate, and sort of manage it for any staff going forward. If you want to revoke it from these two employees or these employees who have moved further away, unfortunately, that's going to be a bit of a consultation period because you gave them a benefit, which was payment to and from work. And they've made a choice, yes, which increased costs on the business, but there wasn't a mechanism to stop that cost from occurring. So they haven't really done anything wrong, just unfortunately there's an extra cost for the business. So what you need to do is run a consultation process to say, hey, we're proposing to change this benefit so it's capped at 20 k's away from the office. I recognise that this is going to put extra costs on you. In exchange, we're going to make a one-off payment of $500 or a one-off payment of $400 to acknowledge that we are taking a benefit away from you. What are your thoughts? And then you can kind of go through that consultation process from there. I would recommend getting some specialist advice because taking benefits away from employees obviously is likely to spur some hurt feelings, and you want to just manage that consultation process clearly. So the good news, Amber, is it can be done. The bad news is you just might have to step a bit carefully in terms of your legal obligations there. Cool. Last question here from Anonymous, and then we'll be bang on time to finish. If you have office-based staff as well as staff who work from home as they aren't located where the office is, and you're offering office-based staff a fuel-free day every week to work from home, is it fair for the remotely based team member to expect any sort of compensation? And if so, what would we offer, given office staff are saving both fuel and parking costs for the days that we work from home? So I would say that you don't have to offer anything similar to the work from home staff, because what you're doing is you're reducing your office-based staff costs. You're not paying them extra. If you were paying them extra, I would say yes, you should probably pay your work from home staff something because you're giving a cash in hand benefit unequally amongst your team, and maybe you want to think about how you manage that. But all you're saying is, so this person works from home entirely and they don't have any costs associated with their commute because they work from home. This person has 5 days a week travel costs because they're coming to the office. I'm going to help reduce this person's costs by giving them 1 day a week at home. I'm not paying them anything extra. I'm just agreeing that they can have a similar arrangement to my fully remote staff. There's no cash in hand exchange. Their pay doesn't change. There's nothing that goes through payroll. I'm just changing their working conditions so that there is a benefit for them kind of in the background. And because it's a change to their working arrangement, basically, I would say that there's nothing you need to think about offering your work from home staff. No one's getting anything extra. You're just giving someone a work from home day, and giving someone a work from home day doesn't trigger an obligation to offer anyone else in particular. Cool. Alrighty, we are at time. Thank you for your questions. I trust that was useful and that you took something away from that conversation. If there's anything you'd like to follow up on, you are very welcome to get in touch. My email address is sylvie, SYLVIE, @myhr.works. If you're in New Zealand, you can call us on 0800 69 4769. And again, this webinar and the slides will be available afterwards and you will get an email. So that's all from us. Thank you again for coming along. I hope you have a lovely rest of your Wednesday, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Ka kite.